Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is actually one of my oldest samples. In fact, it might have been amongst the first samples that I bought. And honestly, and in fact, I think I only tested this like 2 weeks ago, so I've had it for possibly going on 2 years, which says something. And as you'll see, if I hold the bottle just right, that the only ink I've taken out of it was to put in this test. And the thing is, I was avoiding using it because, I don't know, was it someone born in the 80s, you know? I always remember that Got Milk commercial where the guy calls, and it's like, who shot Alexander Hamilton in that famous duel? And that sort of stuck with me, and so it made me happy. And since there's only so little ink, I was avoiding using it, I was hoarding it. But there were some problems, so we'll get into that. But the pen that I used was this JinHao X750. And the thing is, my X450s tend to be pretty broad and pretty wet, but my 750s tend to be quite moderate. They're a very medium. The flow is very, the flow for the pen would be a 5 out of 10. It's just simple, not wet, not dry. However, this ink in this pen went a little crazy. This is possibly one of the wettest experiences I've ever had with this ink in this pen. It was seriously wet. It was probably like a 7.5, just quite wet. So I don't know what was going on. Yeah. Weird stuff. Now, it is a purple ink. It is actually kind of lovely shade of purple that I compare it to a few others. So here's another ink by DeAtramentis, Giacomo Puccini, which is quite similar. I'd say it's just a teeny shade darker, perhaps. Mont Blanc's Lavender Purple, which actually the camera is highlighting the differences a little bit. It's got a teeny bit more red and it's got more shading to it. DeAtramentis Aubergine, which again is probably just, it's so similar, except you can see a little bit more shading on here. And then DeAtramentis Scented Black Currant, which is maybe just a touch darker. But yeah, so let's check out the chromatography, which is interesting because this is something I've noticed with a lot of DeAtramentis inks. They've got this dark gray at the middle, or at the bottom, I guess, that doesn't want to rinse off with water, which is certainly what you see here. You see this dark gray dot, you see the haze kind of going up, and then the gray leaves and the purple begins. You get this very bright, almost magenta at the corners. Now here I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it, but do you see just how dark that dot got? So yeah, thought I'd see how it withstood various forms of torture. Oddly enough, this is the only ink I've ever seen react to denatured alcohol, to the point where I'm thinking about stop doing it in these little tests. But if you see, if my camera will ever focus, this pink haze. Weird, right? Now here's water, where you definitely see that gray that didn't wash away, and the pinky purple leaving. The bleach broke up some of that gray, but not completely. The ammonia pen flush moved the pink around and a little bit of the gray, but not a lot of it. And the hydrogen peroxide didn't move the gray at all, but it definitely got rid of any of that purple. So, interesting. Now, let's look at the paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Try and hold this still so you can get a look. Now, this is a lovely dark shade of purple. 6 seconds to dry. Now, the thing is, this ink had only been in this pen for 27 hours before I started using it. And if you've seen some of my other videos, I talked about something called DeAtramentis syndrome, which is something that the longer the ink is out of its vessel and in a pen, the worse the performance gets on paper. So that was partly why I wanted to use this ink when it was still very fresh. It was barely a day old. Still, there's problems. The only thing I can think of is maybe it's because this is one of my oldest samples, but still, we're going to have some problems. So, you see this? This. Anyways, you see that feathering? You got feathering on Clairefontaine. This is 90-gram paper. Yeah. And there's not a lot of shading on here. It's just a straight purple. It's, yeah. And we actually get some near bleed in a few places on 90-gram paper. So, yeah. Now, the water test, you definitely get something dark at the center, and in fact, a lot of the purple didn't want to wash away either, but yeah, so if you had to recover that, you could, but the purple did feather and explode. Now, next up is a paper that nobody asked for, but I have lots of, so here we go. It's Fabriano Paper. It's 85 grams per square meter, and it's certified chlorine-free, so that it's not bleached to get it white. It's a chemical balance thing, but anyways, it took 20 seconds to dry. Here you do get shading, and actually I'm going to try and get this on camera. Do you look in the scrubby? You get gold sheen. And one of the things about this paper is even though it's very dense, it still feels like paper. It's not smushed smooth the way Clairefontaine or Rhodia is. You still feel the texture of the fibers of the paper, which makes it kind of fun to write on. But yeah, there's a little bit of sheen in the writing as well. Here it is well behaved. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. All good in that regard. It can handle the wet flow, but despite it apparently aging badly. But you do get this purple puddle in the water test, but what's at the center is very clear and very dark. If you had to recover that, you could. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. However, the initial piece of paper that I used was behaving so badly that I thought it had to be one of the bits from the bottom of the stack. So, yeah, I was like, that's not accurate. Let's get a new one. So, this is from a number 11 pad. It's tiny. But here it was much more well behaved. It took 16 seconds to dry. You do get a tiny bit of shading, not a ton. But yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread. I'd say maybe there's a tiny bit of echo, but it's the quadrilateral paper that's kind of hiding it. But there's no sheen on here. Now, you do get this purple haze, but what's at the center is very there and very dark. So if you had to recover that, you could. So yeah. Next up is Tomoe River Paper, which tends to draw out dry times, which it certainly did. You can see how wet that flow must have been. Ooh, and you can see it already. It's got gold sheen. It's got gold sheen all throughout. So where you lay it on thick, you get this gold sheen, which the gold and the purple, very regal, nice contrast. But yeah, I said finally there's no bleed or feather or spread because I couldn't believe what it did to Clairefontaine, and I hadn't retested the Rhodia yet, so I didn't know what was going on. But yeah, this paper loves to let ink wash away when you add more water, and it really mostly did. You do get that purple haze, but what's at the center, although it's there and it's legible, it's not as dark as I would have expected. Now, this is a very dark purple, and this is obscenely thin paper. So you are going to get echo. If that's something you're very sensitive to, or you compulsively have to write on both sides of paper, something to be aware of. Now for the next three tests, the really wet flow of this ink and the aggressive behavior is going to cause a bit of a problem. Now here is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, where it took 2 seconds to dry, despite the fact that this is obviously very absorbent paper. Because if you look at how woolly that is, you see the feathers, and the massive spread, you see the line width difference. I mean, this is most certainly in a European broad at this point. In fact, this might even be a moderate double broad. I honestly don't know how I can like tell you just how intense that is. But yeah, the world's worst paper cannot handle a very wet medium nib with an aggressive ink. Shock, right? But yeah. But since the paper is absorbent, it sucks the ink in, makes it harder to wash out. So what's at the center is very dark. In fact, in person, it almost looks darker than that. But anyways, the purple is most certainly jaunting off. Yeah, so you get this bright pink haze, so that's cool. If you want to do something artistic, that could be a thing. Now here's Mead Notebook Paper, which is physically thinner than 20-pound paper. So the fact that we've got an aggressive wet ink and a medium nib on very cheap paper, we're going to get results that would logically follow such scenarios. You get 2 seconds to dry. You don't really get any shading, obviously. You do get feathers, and you get one spot of full-on bleed. Touch the next page. Now, we do have some spots where it definitely got to the other side, even if it didn't get onto the page behind it. Just to clarify, this got onto the page behind it in several spots, granted mostly along the edge, because that's the side of the paper, and it says something about how the paper's manufactured poorly. But yeah, you get spread, you get feathering, you get some bleed, but since this paper is absorbent, it sucked the ink in, made it harder to wash out. So what's there is very dark and very clear, but you've got this purpley pink stuff shooting off. So when I see this, sometimes I think maybe if I add more water, you know, like to wash more of that pink off, it would be clearer to read, but yeah. Anyways, lastly is Moleskine paper, which I hate because this paper hates ink, and it hates water too, so ink plus water equals disaster. I mean, how, like, so have we seen anywhere on these tests that center gray ink move at all? No. Here we do. That center dark gray ink feathers and explodes right along with the purple. That is not awesome. So it's a mess. It is not fun to read. If you had to recover it, maybe you could, but yeah. But again, an aggressive acting ink in a wet flowing pen on some of the worst paper I have ever encountered, and we are going to get some bad results. You get a lot of spread, you get a lot of feathering, and you get a ton of bleed. It fully came through onto the page below in a couple places, there, and there, and there, and somewhere down here. I can't remember where. It might have been, oh, it was that, yeah. Or maybe it was through here. But anyways, so not great. So yeah, there you go. There's DeAtramentis Alexander Hamilton. It's a lovely dark purple. I was really excited about the ink because I'm nerdy that way. Aaron Burr, by the way, was the person who shot Alexander Hamilton in that duel. But anyways, maybe don't keep a sample for 2 years. Just a thought. But yeah, it's DeAtramentis doesn't age well generally, and yeah, so you know what, this ink was flowing really wet for me. Does it, if you have experience with it, has this ink been really wet for you? I'd really like to know, just in, like, what's your experience with this ink? Because admittedly it is old, it was doing weird things. Please leave a comment down below, let me know what was up with your sample or bottle. I'm very confused. For your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.